I hope you all are doing well. Thanks for sharing your afternoon with us. I'm David Hayes with the Africa Business School. I am pleased to have you here for the last of our sessions on entrepreneurship. I've enjoyed speaking with you guys, and today I get an opportunity to moderate a panel of experts for you. A couple of things for you to think about on the screen. If you have questions, please ask them in the Q&A section of Zoom. You'll see that on the bottom right of your screen. You can ask any questions that you have. We're going to try to answer those as we go along through the session. So I'll look for your questions as well as Geeta. We'll look for those as well, and we'll ensure that you get answers to your questions. Please make sure that your microphones are muted, but I think the webinar takes care of that. And if you need to use the chat box, we've got that open and available for you guys as well. So having said all that, let's get started. So we have had a series over the last month of sessions for you that deals with entrepreneurship. I'm going to review a little bit of that information for you today in the sense of the evolving role of what being entrepreneurial means, the development of a mindset. We've talked about those, and of course today we say entrepreneurship in action. We have three outstanding entrepreneurs for you, all working in different types of fields, so it should be an interesting session, I think, for us all. We'll recap the past sessions. We're going to introduce the panelists to you. I have a limited number of questions that I will pose to the panelists, but certainly we'd like to hear from you. So as we're going along, any questions that you have, any thoughts or ideas that you'd like answers from the panelists, certainly ask them in the Q&A section of Zoom. So I made a case to you. So throughout the last four sessions, I've told you that the term entrepreneurship is changing, that yes, it does mean starting your own company or new venture creation, but that those companies that are entrepreneurial and that are large ongoing organizations outperform their peers. So those that are show creativity, show innovation, or consider themselves to be entrepreneurial, do better than those that don't. That we see global workforce changes. We see within the workforce trends towards freelancing, towards consulting, towards contract labor. We discussed that the majority of us do not end up in fields that relate to our degrees from university. So if you put all of that together, we made a case that we need to all develop entrepreneurial abilities or entrepreneurial capabilities or an entrepreneurial mindset, that's of increasing importance and can increase our chances of success in the future. So we spent a session or two speaking about what is the mindset. And we talked about it as a mindset that can help us regardless of what our career path is. So no matter what we want to do, that if we have a mindset and we have the ability of seeing things that others can't see, to look at conditions that are uncertain, and of course we're definitely in one of those now with COVID-19, that if we're able to respond to those conditions with innovation and creativity that others can't see, that we'll be better off. I posed to you some of the research that I've done, which says that the development of a mindset is important for all of us. So whether we start our own company, we work for a large organization like you'll hear from Chris Barley at Goodyear, or many of you from OCP, whether we do freelancing or consulting or contracting, that the development of a mindset means building skills that will allow us to be more successful in the future, developing our self-efficacy, which of course would be our confidence or the perception of our confidence and the skills that we would have. And then thinking through our personality. What are the things that we like or not like? Do we like to take risk or not? Do we like a structured environment or not? That those personality traits will drive the type of entrepreneurial opportunity that we would seek out in the future. So are we best working for a large organization? Are we more happy starting our own company? Are we more happy as contractors? So that's sort of the positioning of all the things we've talked about in the last sessions. In today's session, I'm pleased to bring to you a panel that is global in its perspective. We have Alexandra Nash as our social entrepreneur in our panel. And then the companies that she's been involved in, she'll tell you a little bit about those with Yumi, and of course now with Nashify. We have Hassan Rashid, and he's from Morocco, and he is a bespoke travel company called Experience Morocco. And then on the corporate side, we have Chris Varley here from Goodyear. And you know, Goodyear is very global. Chris is involved in innovation and commercialization with Goodyear. So I think a very interesting, diverse panel for you. I want to go through and have them first tell us a little bit about yourself and the businesses that you're involved in. And we'll sort of go in order of the slides, if it was okay. So Alexandra, I'd like to introduce Alexandra Nash to you. And she's going to unmute her mic and tell us a little bit about herself and the endeavors.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Alexandra Nash. I am the founder of Yumi. At Yumi, we have made a CO2 negative reusable water bottle made with 100% sugarcane. And then for every water bottle we sell, we support water projects in the Central African Republic. And I also run Nashified, where I am a consultant and I help with any kind of management positions in a variety of fields, mainly smaller entrepreneurial businesses. And I'm also about to start a PhD program actually in Australia, but right now I'm in Sweden.
Thanks, Alexandra. We have Hassan Rashid from Morocco. So Hassan, welcome.
Well, thank you, David. So my name is Hassan Rashid from Morocco. I am the co-founder and managing partner of Experience Morocco, which is a bespoke travel company that does like authentic, tailor-made travel circuits around Morocco for now. I also run a small seed capital, so venture capital firm where we provide capital and guidance to entrepreneurs. The fund is quite agnostic, so the investments we support and work with entrepreneurs across a large spectrum of geographies, sectors, and like profiles or business models. Yeah, so that's it.
Thank you, Hassan. And then finally, we have from the corporate side, we have Chris Farley from Goodyear. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, David. So I am part of an organization within Goodyear that's called External Science and Technology. Most of you are probably familiar with Goodyear as a tire manufacturer, but we are increasingly seeing ourselves as a company that is in the mobility space. So that means there are lots of things that we don't do today that we need to be doing tomorrow. And my organization looks outside of Goodyear at research universities, at other large companies, and especially at startups to see, well, who is doing something that's interesting that we would benefit from and that they could benefit from a relationship with Goodyear. So it's an open innovation approach to transforming the company.
Thank you, Chris. So I want to remind you that if you have questions along the way, please ask them in the Q&A section, and we'll be looking for your questions and then posing them to the panelists as we go along. So I have a few questions that I've lined up for the panelists. So let me introduce sort of the next one to you. I'm interested in skills, and I'm interested in your environment. What are the skills that you see that we need to have to be successful in terms of the entrepreneurial activities or innovation within our organization? So any one of you like to tackle that first?
Well, I can take it from the corporate side. I think that these are fairly universal. It's important that you be very good at listening, listening to your stakeholders, listening to your management, and of course, most importantly, listening to your customers. But beyond just listening, you need to be able to interpret, anticipate, and see beyond just what customers are saying and identify pain points so that then you can ask the right questions about how to make changes take place. Are there things we could be doing differently? how would we do it differently? What would it mean to us to do things in a different way? How would I make that happen?
So Chris, you're speaking about sort of the pain points, and then if we would say ideation. So really pain points from a customer's perspective, what they're having, and that allows you guys to then come up with solutions or innovative creations to solve those problems.
Yes, we joke sometimes that our group is about where the rubber meets the blue sky. A lot of it is just asking, what if? What if instead of selling tires, what if we sold miles? Well, how would we do that? What would that look like? What would we have to do differently?
Okay, thank you. Alexandra, in your business, what skills does an entrepreneur need to be successful in a social endeavor?
I think as a social entrepreneur, whether you call them skills or maybe more traits, I think things such as integrity, honesty, morality is very important, because that ties straight into your business model, and the trust that you have with all your stakeholders is really important. To have a high belief in yourself, to be approachable and flexible and have a compassion, and have an open mind, and have the ability to relate to people of all different walks of life are a couple of the things I find important.
Thanks. I'm going to follow up and ask you, because I should have done that before. How do you define social entrepreneurship? What does that mean to you?
As you might know, there's a million different definitions of it. But for me, it's some kind of business where in the core business, you are set out to not just make profit, but to help someone else. And for me, it also means that it is an organization that it's sustaining itself. Therefore, you have to make some sort of money to sustain yourself, and you're not reliant upon grants or, just donations. And I know some have a slightly different definition, but that's what it means to me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, she mentions there's an ongoing debate with universities about defining social entrepreneurship, which is an interesting one, but I agree with you in terms of sustainability within an organization, one that sustains itself and makes a societal impact. So those are generally the two things individuals think about. So Hassan, so for you, skills or traits when you think about entrepreneurship and things that would be successful or make you successful, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so there are a few things a few skills that are kind of necessary to be a successful entrepreneur. Chris and Alex touched on a few of those. I'd add to that, a good entrepreneur needs to be a self-starter. There is no 9 to 5. There is no defined framework of how are you going to create value. That gets defined every day. So having a character that allows you to wake up, go somewhere, or just stay wherever you are, but not having a task to do, but creating that task and defining that path that will get you to create value. So being a self-starter is really important. You need to have a healthy relationship with risk, or like some would say slightly unhealthy, like a little bit above what the average person would take. Entrepreneurship is inherently risk-taking. It's going in a path that's less traveled, and accepting the failure that can come with it, or the delay in reward or in success that can come with it. Failure in general is something that you need to be able to sustain and learn from. Like I know no entrepreneur that set out to create a company or to create value in a certain way and ended up creating it in the exact same way. An entrepreneurship journey has multiple pivots along the way. So being able to take feedback that something's not working, or that the way you're trying to create value is not necessarily the right thing for your stakeholders, for your customers, and realize that you need to change your approach to it multiple times. So being able to learn from your failures and being able to release your agenda and change. The last thing that I would say, and that's a little bit more personal, is it's very lonely at the top. So if you're trying to create a company yourself, like you're gonna get questioned by your surrounding, you're gonna get negative feedback from customers, you're gonna get a lot of like data points that are saying that you're not doing the right thing at one point or another, and you're gonna be questioning yourself. So in my case, having a co-founder has been absolutely changing, absolutely life-changing. So I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't have been able to stay at this venture or other ventures alone if I didn't have a co-founder with whom I work well, and with that could be a sounding board, reassuring me that I'm not crazy, or at least I'm not the only one who's crazy. And that helps along the journey. I know that a lot of successful entrepreneurs manage to do it on their own, but that takes a certain level of confidence and of stubbornness, even like going on a way while you're getting constantly feedback that it's probably not the right way to go. So yeah, that's what I have to add.
Thank you. Appreciate that. You mentioned risk. So have you found in your experience that it is calculated risk that you're taking? Do you think through ways to lessen the risk, maximize the opportunity along the way? Or is it just that entrepreneurs inherently just take more risk?
Well, take more risk doesn't mean taking incalculated risk. Yeah, like the short answer is yes. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. I don't believe in half doing things. So the weekend entrepreneurs or the evening entrepreneurs, it's like, so you're basically spending a lot of your time and going in a certain route that might or might not work. Obviously a salaried position, or like a job where somebody tells you what to do and then tells you a good job after you've done the job properly and rewards you financially and otherwise, is a lot less risky. When you go the entrepreneurship route, you're literally putting all your eggs in the same basket, and that's inherently risky. Now, if you're just in it for the sake of the risk, you're not an entrepreneur, you're a gambler. So yes, like good rewards come from taking serious risks, from being able to take risks, but they're always calculated risk. That like taking unnecessary risks or risks where the rewards are not proportional to what you're doing, that's, yeah, it should be calculated.
Thank you.
I would echo Hassan's points about risk. Even in a corporate environment where you're getting a paycheck, the type of role that I have typically at a corporation, it's gone within 5 years. These groups get started up, they start to get some change, and then they are trying to do too much change and they're just pushed aside. So there's a risk. This is not a career path to the CEO of a corporation. And in some ways, my organization has been around for 10 years. I ask myself every day, that's twice as long as most of these kinds of organizations. Either we're doing something really, really right, or we're not pushing hard enough. And I have to ask myself that question every day.
Thanks, Chris. I do have a follow-up here for you. So we have a question from the audience that's for the corporate side. So it's, what are the skills required for the intrapreneur? And this is going to get into politics. It says bypass the political side of a corporation, or how corporate politics affect the output of the innovation effort.
They impact it greatly. And as I said, these organizations often go away because they're seen as being too much of a thorn in the side of the traditional way of doing business. I feel that one of the ways that you can be more successful is to practice what I call corporate jujitsu. When you get resistance to a change that you are advocating for, you need to leverage that resistance in the direction you want it to go. So it is much less about telling people in the organization what needs to be done, and more about finding out what their objections are and then leveraging those objections to get them on board with what you want to try to do. So it's, again, it's a lot of it is asking questions, and it's listening, and it's still identifying those pain points. This time you're looking for what is the pain point internally in the company that makes someone resistant to this change. And once you've identified that pain point, then you can go about finding ways of solving it. And often it's through a questioning of things. If someone is used to doing things in a certain way, you want to find out what it is that makes them feel comfortable in doing it that way. And you can ask them questions that challenge a little bit. Say, for example, I notice your sales goals are to increase sales 5% a year in your group, or in your division, or your product line. What if there were a way that you could double that? Would that be something you'd be interested in? Now, you'd have to be a pretty crazy manager to not say yes to that question. So now you've opened up the door to engaging them in thinking differently. But it is baby steps, very much baby steps.
Thank you, Chris. I have another question for you all, and I think I'm going to start. I'll ask Alexandra to start with this one. So I talk about this concept of an entrepreneurial mindset, and it could be personality traits, it could be skills, it could be an internal locus of control, respond versus react. But to you, what does an entrepreneurial mindset mean to you? And then tell me a little bit about the components of it for you.
That's a good question. I think a saying that's stuck in my mind that I heard a while ago was something like, it's not like a brave person don't have fears, they just do it anyways. So I think some sort of, you need to develop some sort of relationship with fear. So put yourself in situations where you're slightly scared all the time. And then kind of realize that you can overcome that. I think that's very important in order to develop an entrepreneurial mindset. I also think it's important to actually do things. So instead of sitting at home trying to come up with the perfect idea, go out and have 1,000 jobs, and you'll probably come back with 1,000 skills. And it's a combination of those skills that I think a lot of the time breeds an innovation. It's seldom an expert alone or a lot of expertise in one field. And I mean, you can see that with people like Elon Musk, for example, who, he has a broad variety of skills and expertise that he put into different kind of ventures. And I think exposure is also a big one, whether it's, it could be something like travel, exposure to different kind of people, working at different types of organizations, to kind of expose yourself to a lot of different situations, make you think and question things. And it's that kind of curiosity that's also one of the key components to an entrepreneurial mindset. How can I make something better for someone? How can I make something different? Or, how can I solve someone's problem? Or why does that problem exist? Always asking questions, staying curious. So yeah, those are a few of the things.
Thank you. Is there anything specific to social entrepreneurship and the mindset? Because you've chosen the path to go out and help solve societal problems. Not saying that we don't do that as entrepreneurs, but specifically your companies. Anything there that made you go in that direction?
Well, I think you have two things. First, you have the general innovation, because you still have to have good products, because the social idea doesn't sell itself. But then you also have the cause, or whatever the problem is you try to help. And I think you need to have a certain sense of compassion and an ability to read people, because I think storytelling is extra important in social businesses or social entrepreneurial businesses. And in order to be a good storyteller, you need to be able to touch people and speak to their hearts. And that requires a certain type of skill. And I also think it's extra important to be honest and transparent. because I personally maybe think that should be, you know, a skill or a trait that's important to all entrepreneurs, but especially for social entrepreneurs. You know, you're asking for someone to buy something from you to help a cause. So it's important that you can show the direct link to where that, you know, to where that money goes. So it's an interesting combination. You have to keep the, you know, the customers happy, but also the organization or your cause, in my case, water. So you also have to be innovative in, you know, what's the best way that I can get clean water to these people at the same time as I develop the most eco-friendly water bottle. So I think in a sense, you're adding an extra, you know, an extra hard thing to figure out. But it's, I mean, it's well worth it.
Thank you. Hassan, how would you answer the question about the entrepreneurial mindset?
Okay, so the entrepreneurial mindset. So the idea is, I'll start just one step above. So work, basically any kind of work, is transforming your skill set and your time into value. So your time plus whatever you know how to do, you do it for a certain amount of time, and that creates value somewhere. So in non-entrepreneurial work, the process by which you transform your skills and your time into value is somebody else's problem. So somebody pays you for 40 hours of your time a week or so, and then asks you to do tasks, and then how those tasks transform into value creation for you and for the company you work for is somebody else's problem. In an entrepreneurial role, you basically own that process, and you create value yourself, and then you hire other people. So you pay other people for 40 hours of their time to create value. That clearly encompasses entrepreneurial as well as intrapreneurial. So when you're in an entrepreneurial role, you basically have ownership over how to use your time to create value as well, even within a big corporation. So the mindset will evolve around that. So how am I, so the entrepreneurial mindset is, how am I using the skills that are available to me, my own and those of the people in my team, plus the time that we're all working into creating value. So that mindset, at some point, it becomes kind of an obsession. So you always are questioning the processes by which things are done, and are questioning how can you create value. So the time when it was an aha moment for me and my co-founder was like, I used to go to a restaurant just and enjoy a meal and talk about life, but at some point you find that the conversations steer into, how many plates do you think they serve at lunch? How many are they serving at dinner? Do you think they have enough employees here? Is everybody utilized well? Is this space used well, or can we reconvert it and use it into something else? So basically, you're sitting having a nice meal and you're looking at the space, at the employees, and at the way they do things, and thinking of how is that process optimized, or how can it be creating more value? So the mindset is basically questioning every process that makes value at the end, and then also like optimizing, always thinking about where there is waste, where waste can be replaced, or how can you do things more efficiently. So yeah, and that applies to both creating your own company or being an entrepreneurial role within a larger corporation.
Thank you. Chris, Hassan spoke a little bit about entrepreneurship, but speak about the mindset for you and from your perspective.
Yeah, so I think that Alexandra and Hassan captured very nicely the mindset as one that is constantly asking questions, constantly challenging the status quo. That's key. You often will hear business people say how important it is to listen to the customer. And that is true. It is important. And you will often get incremental improvements to a product by listening to the customer. What's harder to do is to hear what's happening underneath the voice that you're hearing, that you're listening to. So hearing is, to me, different than just listening. You can listen and respond. Hearing means you have to synthesize a whole bunch of different inputs. You think about when a child throws a tantrum and is yelling and screaming, typically is not the thing that you think it is. It's something else that's motivating it. They're bored or what have you. And an entrepreneur looks beyond just that surface set of questions and asks deeper questions. And I'll give you a really concrete example. Henry Ford said that if he had listened to his customers, he would have just bred a faster horse. But no, he heard that his customers wanted to move in a different way than they currently could with horses, and he came up with an entirely fundamentally new way of doing things. And that's the key. It's coming up with new, non-obvious solutions to problems and pain points that exist in the market.
Thank you, Chris. So some good answers and different perspectives that have, I think, a lot that align together. And I think Chris just said it very well. It's kind of looking for the things that are not obvious, or as he said, it's sort of looking underneath, listening to what people are saying, but what are they really asking for? And I was listening to Hassan as well, and I have that. I don't know if that's a curse or a blessing, Hassan. You go out for a nice meal, but the same thing, I'm worried as I'm walking in, oh, what does the signage look like? Does it represent this organization well? Does the restaurant look the way it should? Is it efficient in the way that it's operating? So it's an interesting mindset for sure. Next question. So maybe Alexandra, we'll start with you. How do you cultivate creativity and innovation? I think we talked a lot about coming up with ideas and we talked about innovation, but what can we do in our environment to create an environment that rewards creativity and innovation?
That's a good question. I think trial and error is very important, and that can look differently depending on what context you are in, whether it's you personally or if it's an organization. But it's important to be in a setting where it's okay to try things. And also, I think, again, going back to answering questions, I think questions can also be very powerful in a setting. If you have a group of people that are trying to figure out, the answer to a problem, to instead of trying to find the answer, just scrap that and then start asking questions instead. And if you just keep asking questions, then after a while, I think you see, oh, okay, what questions are relevant here? Okay, these 5 questions, let's see if we can find an answer to those 5 questions. So I think it's important to break that process down, and also give people time. I think that is an important aspect. A lot of the time, especially, even in organization or as an entrepreneur, if you're an entrepreneur, you also gotta keep reinventing yourself. And very seldom do we, give us a time slot big enough to actually have the capacity to come up with these things. And I think that's very, very important. And especially, I don't know, I'm sure Chris will talk about that, but in bigger organizations, to almost schedule in time with no agenda, but for people to, be able to almost like free write, but free think. I think that's an important concept as well.
Since you mentioned Chris, I'm going to ask you to respond to the question, but I want to let the audience know if you have questions, please type those into the Q&A feature, and we'll be happy to answer those as you have them. But Chris, what are your thoughts?
So you've heard all 3 of us say that failure is an essential part of the entrepreneurial mindset and of being an entrepreneur. But no one sets out to fail. That's not what you're trying to do. You want to try to avoid that by figuring out your mistakes early and making changes along the way. Especially in large organizations, the fear of failure is very, very strong. At a previous job, when I ran an organization within AT&T, I ran a group that was chartered with trying to come up with new online services pretty much at the beginning of the internet, back in the early 90s. And we were obviously going to fail a lot. And at first, this group was very timid. So I decided to institute a rule. And the rule was that after every new product or service launch, we were going to have a debrief, and it was going to be a penalty-free debrief. The rule was you could not say what anyone else in the group had done wrong. You could only congratulate somebody on something they did right, or talk about something you had done wrong. And there was a little bit of skepticism in their eyes, I could tell. We did a product launch over a holiday weekend. The servers got hammered, the service went down, and we had the debrief, and I started it off by saying, well, I learned that you don't launch a new service on a holiday weekend. That was my mistake. As soon as I did that, all the other engineers in the room started saying, well, but wait, I programmed this wrong. I had my servers set in such a way that they were getting hit twice. He was doing his part right. It just changed the mood entirely, and it brought some cohesiveness, and it made people realize that it was okay to stumble, that you're part of a team, and we're in this together, and we will pick each other up, and we will learn from it, and we will learn quickly, and then we will move on to the next thing. So you have to create a supportive culture that allows people, doesn't encourage them to fail, but allows them to learn quickly from failure and move on to success.
Thank you, Chris. Hassan, anything to add to that?
No, yeah, Chris's point on failure is absolutely crucial. Like fostering an environment where failure is not, well, it's not encouraged, but it's not feared. And encouraging people to fail, own their failures, and learn from them. I always say to my coworkers that I only get upset if the same mistake is made twice. If it's the first time it's made, it's a learning opportunity for all of us. We know that we shouldn't do things that way. I only get upset if the exact same mistake is repeated 2 times. Other than that, I'm actually happy every time because every time we learn from it. So fostering an environment where you're encouraged to learn from your failures and encouraged to own up to your failures is very important. It's also important to fail fast and to move to the next thing fast. So it's not that the successful companies are not the ones who don't fail enough. They're the ones who can learn that they're not on the right path and move fast from it. The other thing that I can add to that is basically diversity. That's a segue into diversity. So when you're trying to optimize a process or create value, you could be the smartest person in the world. Your process is only informed by your own thought process, your own experience in life, and the way you do things. A big mistake is it's always a big mistake to try to create a product on your own that caters to your own needs, because it can be a general need. It's not going to be as global as you think. So catering it, it's good to try to start first by solving a problem that you have, but making sure that other people have the same problem or would actually appreciate the same solution is important. So debating the issue with other people and getting input on what you're trying to do is crucial. Now, if you're getting input from your frat buddies at university, you're basically a bunch of people with pretty much the same thought process, and it's not going to be diverse. It's not going to, the solution is not going to be robust enough to get out there for the world. So encouraging an environment where you're surrounded with other smart people that you talk to and have them challenge your idea. And those people come from different backgrounds, different gender identities, different ethnicity, religious background, et cetera, will make whatever product or service you're trying to put out there all the more robust, because you're going to have blind spots and that will help you rectify them.
Thank you. And speaking of diversity, I'm going to bypass this one. We can come, but Chris kind of touched on this one question we have here about overcoming restrictive thinking. But let me ask the two of you, Alexandra and then Chris, your thoughts on the role of diversity within the entrepreneurial mindset or within entrepreneurship in your environment.
In social entrepreneurship, I think, of course, it's very important and it's almost necessary because you tend to work with groups that are not necessarily always the group where that, you know, your peers. And I think you need to, it benefits you to have that kind of exposure to different kind of groups of people. And I mean, I think any person that has diversity in their life will be better at what they do. The doctor that's been in a war hospital in, I don't know, in Congo is going to be better at the surgery table in Stockholm. And I think the professor that have taught at 10 different universities is going to have a different mindset than someone that's been at the same place their entire life. So I think it's extremely important. And for us working in Central Africa, it's very important to have that open mindset and have that inclusive mindset, because that's the key how we're on our way to solve the water crisis in the Central African Republic. It's by having all these different groups of people that are actually on the ground with the wells, walking for water, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So I mean, I don't think there is a way to succeed without diversity in social entrepreneurship.
May I ask a quick follow-up for you, as you have a unique position on our panel as the only female on the panel. Any thoughts in terms of gender diversity within entrepreneurship?
For me, I can obviously only speak for myself, but for me as an entrepreneur and as a founder, I've never experienced any kind of issues because of my gender. However, I have a corporate career before this one, where I worked as the CEO for a tech company. And there I found myself struggling a lot more. And I can't help but wonder whether it's, the general entrepreneurial, mindset, and the people that are in that field might have more of an open, inclusive mindset to begin with, whether that could be one of the reasons. But that's why I enjoy being in the social entrepreneurial world, because I feel like I'm being treated as an equal.
Thank you. Chris, I'm going to ask the same question about diversity. We do have a question that regards diversity and concerning it. It says, many said that the most important one in terms of diversity, I guess one of the components is cognitive diversity. So if you have any thought or answer on that as you speak about diversity.
That was a perfect segue to what I was going to say. In the corporate world, the pathway that people carve out for themselves is usually over a 10 to 20 year period if they intend to move up the ladder in that corporation. And the way that you move up the ladder in a corporation is to adopt the mindset of that corporation, which is not going to be diverse by definition. It's very, very focused in on groupthink. And many companies, many tech companies, even startups, wind up suffering from this groupthink. It's kind of a bro culture. I have a child who is non-binary and works in high tech, and they constantly feel threatened by the bro culture. Yet at the same time, I work for a large corporation that's been around for 120 years that makes creating a diverse workplace a core facet of what being a Goodyear employee is all about. And you can see it at the senior levels in the corporations. You see it not just through race or gender, but also through the way someone thinks, the background they come from. When I walk around the halls in Goodyear, I'm hearing 4 or 5 different languages as I go from one building to the other. I'm seeing 2 or 3 different styles of dress and a wide variety of ages and lifestyles. And this is in an environment where we have a image of what the company is, but the way we achieve that is by encouraging diversity of thought. And perhaps that is why my organization has managed to last for 10 years when the life is typically 5 years, is because there's a tolerance for thinking differently. And from the top down, there is encouragement that we need to think differently in order to survive and thrive in the future.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. We do have, and we're going to get to the, forget the conclusions. We'll get here. We have a question for Alexandra. Okay, it says, what is the border, if any, from your perspective, between social entrepreneurship and social innovation?
Tough question. I've never thought of it that way, but I'll give it a go. I think a social innovation could be made within a traditional company, whereas a social entrepreneurial business has a different business model to start with. Would be my take on it. I don't know if you agree, David.
I think from my perspective, yes. And I was thinking too, as you're talking about that, again, with our corporate entrepreneur here with Chris, my suspicion is, as that large organization, they're involved in social innovation. Am I correct about that, Chris?
We are involved in social innovation. A big part of what we do is focused around sustainability. The materials that go into a tire are nasty things. And we are constantly focused on how do we get the nasty parts out. So we have innovative programs that have developed new ways of replacing petroleum oils with soy oil derivatives. We look at ways of improving the recyclability of the tire. We are still profit driven as a company, but a major initiative within R&D is to try to find a way to make a tire out of 100% sustainable renewable materials, both in how those materials were produced, in how they're used in the product, and then in how their afterlife is, how they are treated afterwards. Are they recycled into something else again? We also support a lot of social initiatives because we just feel that that's good, being a good corporate citizen. It goes beyond what we make and sell. It goes to supporting the people to whom we make and sell these products.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. We're running out of time. So here's my question for the three of you, and maybe Hassan, we can start with you. What advice do you have for those listening when it comes to being entrepreneurial? Are there any specific things that you would have offer the audience in terms of your perspective of how to be entrepreneurial, as maybe Hassan was a new venture, Alexandra maybe from social entrepreneurship, and then Chris from the corporate perspective, or any general advice at all for the audience?
Okay, so I'd say, like, for anybody who's considering entrepreneurship, just trying to shift their mindset toward value creation, the point would be start questioning everything. So, like, you're doing things a certain way, asking yourself why and how can it be improved, and also talk. As in, don't develop those ideas or those processes in a vacuum. Get people you trust, people who see things differently, perhaps people who you don't agree with most of the time, and talk it out. Like, that will only make your ideas better. So attend conferences, read books, learn from podcasts, and then apply those things to your life. So anytime you do things a certain way, and that applies to your job, that applies to your gym circuit, the way you eat, your sleep patterns, etc. So if anything seems interesting and worthwhile, if you're doing it for a certain amount of time, question how you're doing it and learn about it / challenge it. Get it challenged by people who think about it differently.
Thank you. Some good points. Alexandra, what are your thoughts?
What jumped to mind was very similar to what Hassan just said. But my advice would be to, how can I use my skills to help someone? It was the main question that we asked ourselves when we started Yumi was, how have we come so far in the world and have so many advanced, technologies, and there are still 800 million people living without safe and clean drinking water? Surely all you have to do is drill wells and fix broken wells. Why is no one fixing broken wells? It costs $40 to fix a broken well, and it costs $10,000 to dig a new one, but no one fixes broken wells. So I think that would be one of my main things. And then another piece of advice also ties back to something we spoke about in the beginning, where I think it's important to set aside the business ideas, but also think for yourself from a personal perspective. Perhaps, why do you want to be an entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur? What is it with that gets you excited? Because I think many times people, you read about it, you hear about it, you think, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. But then, like Hassan says, oh, you don't have any clean lines. You work all the time. Sometimes you work a lot. Sometimes you don't work. You don't have a steady income for, perhaps many years. There are all these things that come with it. So I would say, be sure to think about how you can align your personal values and your preferred lifestyle to what kind of career or entrepreneurial venture you go into.
Thank you. Chris.
So excellent points, both of them made. In a corporate environment, it's very easy for people's careers to turn into silos. And as you get more experience, you move up the ladder. But experience can be a very dangerous thing. It makes you assume facts, not necessarily in evidence. So you need to keep a beginner's mind. You also need to seek out other beginner minds in your organization and outside of your organization. You mentioned, David, at the beginning that you've talked with your students about how they will most likely not wind up in the field of study that they pursue. I have spent most of my corporate career working in technology organizations. My degree is in religious studies. I worked as a writer and producer in Hollywood for a while. I just had an interest in and affinity for technology, and I've worked for companies as diverse as AT&T and Goodyear. I am not an expert in tires. I know nothing about tires. I hope to know as little about tires when I leave Goodyear as I did when I got here, but that was actually part of the reason they brought me in. They wanted to have someone who thought differently about the questions they were asking. And you need to do that in whatever job you have. Always be asking, how can we do things differently? Why are we doing things this way? Is there something else we should be doing instead?
Some great thoughts from all of you. We have run out of time. I'm going to answer a question that came to me, but it's on a different topic. But before I do that, I want to thank the three of you for participating. I think it's really important to those that are listening to hear the perspectives of each of you. And when it comes to developing skills that will lead them in the future to be successful, we see that there's relationships amongst entrepreneurial skills or the mindset that applies to a new venture, a social venture, and then also a corporate venture. So I really appreciate everybody's perspective on that. And I hope that those of you that are listening have enjoyed the conversation. I certainly have. Before we leave, I'm going to answer the question by saying that individuals want to know about the Entrepreneurial Mindset assessment profile that I've offered in the past, that there is a assessment I can send you and then kind of go over the results with you that looks at your personality as well as your skills. I put in the chat box my email address. So you're very welcome to email me at david.hayes@mac.com. If you do that, I'll send you the assessment and then we can follow up afterwards about your results. So that's there. And then Geeta, there's a question about the previous webinar recordings, where one can find those. So would you like to answer that?
Yeah, of course. So for every webinars that happen in the last month, or every webinar that happened in the framework of the ABS Learning Series, you can tune in ABS Africa Business School YouTube channel. There are a recording for every webinar that happened for the past couple weeks, a couple months.
Good.
And you are very welcome to go and browse in.
Good deal. Well, again, thanks to everybody for listening, to our panelists, to Chris Varley, to Alexandra Nash, to Hassan Rashid. Great conversation. Thank you so much. I wish everybody a great afternoon and a fantastic weekend.